All right, we've got a good group here and a tremendous amount of fantastic information to cover. So I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. Welcome to the TAA Education Foundation Texas Workforce Research webinar, um, hosted by or presented by Jason Dorsey. My name is Ian Mattingly. I have the privilege and honor of being the TAAEF president this year. And that means I get to welcome you and welcome our host for today. Jason Dorsey, whom you may remember from his keynote presentation at the TA1 conference in 2025, is going to be presenting information that we have put together in partnership with his firm, um, the Center for Generational Kinetics. This information is a tremendous resource, and we're so pleased to be able to provide this resource to our members in service of our mission to help TAA members recruit, retain, and advance the next generation of industry leaders. We all know that our most valuable resource isn't the bricks and sticks, it's the people. And so I'm going to welcome Jason to the screen to share what he has found and what his research firm has found. He's led over 200 research studies, the best-selling author of Z Economy. Please welcome Jason Dorsey.
Hey, everybody. Great to be with you. Super excited to be here today. If you would, please go to the chat. It will certainly help me out. And just let me know where you're joining from. Let's all take a second. I'm in Conroe, Texas today. So let's go to the chat. We got to make sure we know how to use the chat. Today won't work unless we go to the chat. So I am joining from Conroe. Ooh, San Antonio, Dallas. Somebody else. All right, Arlington, Plano, Austin. Yeah. Houston, Dallas, Houston, Galveston. Looking good. Angleton, come on. Like, hi, Jason. I'm joining from Houston with the exclamation mark. I like how you roll. Brookshire, San Antonio. Whoop, whoop. That's my wife's from Houston. All right, Karen, I see you. Addison, Austin. Hi, Michelle. Awesome. Such great representation. Thank you so much for joining today. I'm really grateful that you are here with us to cover some just fantastic data in this beautiful study. What I always like to start with is what was in the study? Like what was actually covered here? And so we had some key goals that I think are really important and worth going through. First, in the statewide study, and this is important, I should probably pause for a second. Almost all of the data that you see around multifamily or apartments is national, which is great. The challenge or the limitation is that doesn't necessarily represent the state of Texas because those are in aggregate studies. So what we wanted to do with the foundation here was to specifically dive deep in Texas. That's the mandate, and there's a lot of nuance in Texas. As y'all know, it's not just a big state, but geographies vary significantly. There's just a lot going on in our fine state here. And so doing the first of its kind statewide study really brings to life a level of depth, insights, and action specific to Texas. And I just honestly, I don't think that's ever been more important. So big kudos for the team for doing that at TAA. For having the vision and for the Education Foundation for supporting that. So what were our goals? We wanted to explore, what's really going on right now when it comes to Texans specifically and working in the Texas apartment industry. We wanted to understand what would work on the recruiting side. And as a behavioral researcher, it's really important for me to understand sort of in sequence what would get people into the industry, which is the recruiting piece, and then what's going to get them on board, what's going to get them trained, how do we develop their talent, and then how do we drive that retention? So we don't just bring them in, but we get them trained, fired up, motivated, and then get them to stay in this wonderful profession, which we're also passionate about. So these were our study goals. I'll be very candid. We crushed them. Way to go, Becca and team. Super excited about that. All right, let's look at who was in the study. We had 1,000 participants. And the key here, and I can't underscore this enough, these were all current Texas residents. They were ages 18 to 58. That's by design. We really wanted Gen Z up through Gen X. We included 250 who do not have a college degree. This is so important, and it was brilliant that Beck and the team chose to do this. We wanted to look at people who we may not normally either consider or who may not consider us, or who have non-traditional backgrounds. Somebody like myself, even. I didn't finish college, honorary degree, but still, we want people that, we can bring into this profession because there's so much opportunity here. And then also we wanted 250 self-identified Hispanics. Those oversamples give us other perspectives into the workforce that, again, can be missed when you look at everything by total. So really great composition of the study, which makes us not only unique, but gives you insights you might not get really anywhere else. It's never been done before, which is pretty cool. All right. So what were the big things we uncovered? Oh, let me pause for a second. Ian told me this earlier. I'm going to honor Ian and not forget. Please, if you would, if you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat, and then they will copy it and drop it in the Q&A. If you have a question as we go, you can also just put it in the Q&A. You do you. I'm a chat person. Some of y'all are probably Q&A people. You do you. It's fine. What were the key story elements we uncovered? The first is that across everything we looked at, careers in the apartment industry were viewed very positively. Now, this is important because sometimes there's a perception. You know, I got to keynote y'all's amazing event last year in Houston. It was incredible. Mwah! So much fun. And sometimes there's a perception that, you know, people are not positive about working in this industry. And I want to be very clear that gets reinforced a lot, and it is total nonsense. There's a very positive perception of working in this industry. Second is that there are really strong behavioral preferences of what people want on each of those early steps that we talked about: recruiting, onboarding, training, and talent development. This is important because a lot of times when we have legacy businesses, we go with things that have worked in the past because they've worked in the past and we know them well. But the reality is they may not work now. And we have to be the ones to adapt, particularly in a tight job market when we're trying to bring in people for these roles. Third, there's very specific things that drive turnover and retention. It's important that we understand those because most of those, not all, most of those are in our control, most of them. And so if we know what those are, then we can decide how we want to act on that. And the last is that we want to be able to look at this data through a variety of different lenses so that we can understand what specifically fits our property or properties. And that's why you'll see it cut by things like age and gender, education, ethnicity, and more, so that you can make sure and get a good representation of your local geography and the geographies that you represent, which is just awesome. Okay, drum roll. That's my drum roll. As you can tell, I didn't actually play the drums. But let me walk you through what's on each of these slides. We have about 28 slides to cover today. They're all a little bit different, but the setup or structure is pretty similar. We always put the verbatim question at the bottom. That's important because, you know, y'all are like, well, what was the question that was asked? And then we have what the key insight was in the top left, which is what we'll focus on. And then a deeper insight below that, as you'll see sort of in that gray looking font. And then we have wow stats. Wow stats are separate questions that we put on each slide because we felt thematically they go together. And the reason we want to do this is we want to tell a cohesive story, meaning we want to follow along on this journey of bringing people into this wonderful industry. So here we ask, what is your overall perception of working in the apartment industry? And as you can see, about 55%, which is a majority, over half, right, have a positive overall perception. So that would be very positive and somewhat positive. I'm going to be really direct. I'm probably going to get in trouble. A lot of industries I work in do not have this much positivity around working in them. So it is wonderful, wonderful to see so much positivity about working in this industry. And what we look for, two things. We're looking for either a positive view or neutral. And that's really important because I can deal with positive or neutral. If neutral basically means I don't know. But what we want to look at is negative, and there's very little negative perception about this industry. What it really comes down to is it's extremely positive, or people just don't have a perception of it that's neutral, right? Which is fabulous. I'm telling y'all, if you could pick, y'all won. So good job. All right. What else do we see? Gen Z and younger millennials view it much more positively than Gen X. You'll see some of these trends show up. Why is that? Well, we could speculate, but they seem to view this as a good career opportunity, as something that's like just an overall perception that's much more positive than Gen X. Maybe they've got more recent experience living in apartments, or they know people that work in them, but just know, again, there's this perception that younger people don't want to work in this industry maybe, or aren't as positive, and that is complete bunk. Younger generations were very keen to work in this industry. And then if you look at the bottom left, one of my favorite stats in the study, 71% of Texans, the way I like to think about that is more than 7 out of 10 think apartment communities fill a huge needed housing gap in America today. Heart. That was for y'all right there. So as you can see, we're starting from a much more positive place, I think, than many people would assume, which is really, really, really exciting. So one other thing, just technically, so y'all can see, you'll notice that after all the stats around where that stat number is on the left column, it'll say things like without a college degree, Texas Hispanics, or it'll say Gen Pop. Gen Pop just means everybody. That means general population across Texas. Any of the others are different demographic or different variable we're doing an analysis by. So that way you can sort of see how these fit. And if you look here on the slide, again, across all these three cuts that we looked at, general population, without a college degree, Texas, Hispanic, all very, very positive, a majority of them are neutral. So great work, which leads us to the next slide. And here we asked a different question. How interested would you be in pursuing a career in each of the following types of job roles in the apartment industry? So when we gave them this really long list, and then we asked them to rank what would be most interesting. This is what we call a top two box, meaning that the participants selected highlighted the ones that were very or somewhat interested. So across all of them that we looked at, this is where the strongest level of interest was. And so what do we see? At the top, we see community management. Then you can sort of see corporate services, sales, marketing, development, and construction. You can sort of see how all these come together, which is a really beautiful chart. The bottom line is that there's a lot of interest generally in so many of these different positions. And, we helped them to understand what each position was. My point is that when we want to talk about opportunities within the apartment industry today, we should be talking about all of these different job roles, not just ones that people may have seen or may know about, but it turns out almost every single one we tested, a majority of people said these were the ones that they were really, really excited about. And you can see those here in this beautiful list. Occasionally, there are some differences, as you might see without a college degree and so forth, but overall, a lot more consistency, which is really good. And then if you look on the left, 71% of Texans would be surprised to learn that some careers in the apartment industry offer higher pay than entry-level technology jobs. Booyah! And as somebody who studies tech a lot, right now the tech workforce is looking rough. I mean, we need to get more and more people who are in other careers into this industry, because if they understood what it had to offer, they would be incredibly excited. And that's on us to be able to do. And we can do that. We'll learn how today. And then we saw 44% of Texans have considered a career in the apartment industry before, which was honestly higher than I would have guessed, which is really great. That means not only are they, positive, like we saw earlier, they've actually considered it, including 54% of those who are familiar with apartment communities as a place to work. Now, those could be people who lived in the apartment communities, or it could be people who just think about them in terms of employment. But the key is those who are more familiar are even more positive about potentially working here. Again, these are great tailwinds for us to be able to leverage. Here we asked, based on your current knowledge and understanding of the apartment industry, what would you consider the biggest benefits or advantages of working in this field? If you're thinking about this strategically, we wanted to understand perceptions of the industry. Then we wanted to look at specific job roles and see if any jumped out. Turns out they all scored really well. And then now we want to go, okay, well, what are the benefits? What are the advantages that you think is there? What do we see? Number one, this is a rank 3. What you see strongest, job security due to consistent demand for housing. Now, any of you who heard me speak at the beautiful Houston event last year, that was so much fun, by the way. You heard me talk about that stability has risen to the top of what people really, really want. We've never seen a study that specifically asked this for Texas. So to see it come out on top, yeah, go team, go. So just know job security today matters a lot. And we just see that over and over again. Now you see it Gen Pop, but you see it even higher, those without a college degree in Texas Hispanic. So really strong desire for job security. And then you see discounted free housing benefits. We see that a lot across all kinds of industries where people are really concerned about housing. And if they feel like there's some way to get a better deal on that as part of their job, a lot of interest in that. And then you can see make an impact, which I love, 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 love. And then you can see some of these. You'll notice occasionally you'll get things that really jump out, like variety and day-to-day work on the Texas Hispanics. If you look further down the list, sort of jumps out compared to others. That's why we want to look at some of these different perspectives to see what else jumps out that we should know about. But the key thing here is we should be talking about job security in this industry. We should be talking about it all the time, because that really, really is what's viewed as an advantage or a benefit. And then, of course, other housing benefits. So if you look at the left, you'll also see a few other cuts that we looked at. So Texans in the general population, much more likely than those without a college degree to value modern technology. So they want to know that you're using the latest technology. So assuming your communities are doing that or doing that in some way, maybe you're using AI in some way, maybe you're using some other cool stuff, talking about that and letting them see that y'all are not only forward thinking, but you're really taking action now to bring the future to the present. Super cool. And then you'll see some of the team-oriented culture by generation. We occasionally see that. Funny enough, the younger you are, the more excited you are about team-oriented cultures. The older you are, you're like, man, y'all are so funny, Gen X. Then at the bottom, 72% of Texans would consider working in an apartment community if it meant free or discounted rent. Again, that's very, very strong, including 83% of Texans without a college degree. Housing is a massive issue, as all of us in here are aware. People really see that as a highly, highly sought after benefit, whatever that looks like for you and your communities. Here we ask, how likely would each of the following influence you to seriously consider a job in the apartment industry as a career option? So remember, just if you're following along, I'm going to go back one slide. We've looked at the benefits. So, okay, this is behaviorally, these are what we would consider drivers, right? They would move you in a certain direction. Now we're trying to get more to the moment of truth, getting you to actually consider that job or take that job. And what you can see here, what jumps up? Competitive pay and earning potential, benefits, stability, positive work culture. But really, the top three or four, certainly the top three, are all within the margin of error for each. Those all score very, very high. So what people want is competitive pay, benefits, stability. I mean, if we were just to pick those, super strong. And then, of course, you see the others. But just note, if you sort of scan down that, there's not huge differences. All of these are viewed as important. And I think that's what we're seeing in the workforce today. There's a few things that tend to stand out, which usually is stability and pay and benefits. But everything else that follows is still really, really important too. It's not like there's a big drop off there maybe there would have been at a different period of time. Now people are sort of gone through so much turbulence and instability. All these things are suddenly important to them. And so you can see that. So you know what to talk about. If you look at the left again, Texans without a college degree and Texas Hispanics, significantly more likely than the general population. Remember, that's why we had those oversamples. To consider a job in the apartment industry that has a convenient location. With rising fuel prices and depending on mass transit options, proximity to work has become extremely important, both as a driver, but also as a blocker in terms of, in some of the studies we've done, people won't drive more than 15 minutes or max 30 minutes, depending on the commute to get to that work, which really means if I'm trying to recruit people for certain positions, not all, but for certain ones, I need to focus within that sort of radius to be able to have the best chance of people accepting the job and then staying in the job. And then you'll see Texas Hispanics, significantly more likely than the general population to consider a job in the apartment industry if it has a positive work culture. So that's really good to know. And then wow stat, this is one of the blockers. Remember, as a behavioral researcher, I'm looking at drivers and blockers. What's moving you towards something, what's keeping you away from it. And what we see here, over a third of Texans would hesitate to work in an apartment community because of a fear of dealing with unhappy residents, including 42% of Gen Z, the highest of any generation tested. In our Gen Z work, many of you know I write books about Gen Z and speak about Gen Z all the time. Gen Z has the least confidence in their soft skills, in their communication skills, and their in-person skills, and in particular in dealing with conflict or disagreement. So if they think that a certain role is going to have those things, that's definitely a fear or concern, and we need to make sure and let them know how we're going to address that. How can we address that? Maybe we have special training that we take them through. Maybe they're always going to have a team member that's with them whenever there's some sort of conflict they've got to be able to deal with. Maybe they know their manager has their back, whatever it is. But we do want to address that because that's one of those hidden concerns that they certainly have that could be in the back of their mind that might keep them from taking a job. And so we want to be able to address those sorts of things directly. Okay. We went from perception. Remember, we talked a lot about the perception, which we have to say overall was very good. Very good. Lots of interest across the job roles, lots of reasons that people would seriously consider it. Much more positive than I think people often believe. So we're going to go from that perception, which sort of creates opportunity, right? Puts us into possibility. And now we're going to look at recruiting. So we're going to move through that employee life cycle. So here we asked a different question, which was, how likely are you to search for a new job in each way? We want to try to understand how it actually looking for jobs, right? You're going through some job search journey. What does that journey actually look like? The first thing we see, search engines. Now, this is interesting. In some studies we do, search engines does not score at the top. So it's interesting to see that search engines continue to score very high. So it's just something to be aware of what shows up about you, your communities, and so forth in those search engines. Particularly when you look at sites like Indeed and others that tend to index really high just by the nature of the technology they use on the back end of their site. So those show up really high. So we just want to be aware, how do we appear in those search engines? not from living in the community, like that's a whole different conversation, but for working in the community or for working with you, whether that's in a corporate role or at an individual community or property. Job search websites, number two, those can still continue to do well. I think where people are surprised, I'm consistently surprised, visiting individual company websites scores way higher than people assume, way higher. And sometimes we're like, oh, if we're very active on Indeed or we're active on whatever job thing you're using, that's enough. What we're seeing is people have lost a lot of trust in those. And so now they're going to the company website and they're specifically looking in that sort of HR or employment tab or work for us or work here, whatever it's called. And they want to see things that are very humanized. They want to see what a day in the life is like. They want to see all these different things to know what is it really like there, that culture and positivity. You'll also see a little bit of difference. Look at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Look at the fifth one down. Word of mouth through current or former colleagues. Texas Hispanics score much higher or higher on word of mouth than the general population. We see that with certain groups when we do these types of studies. You'll also see towards the bottom career centers, those sorts of things, and Federal Employment Office. You'll see some of those sort of stand out in different groups. That's why we ask so many. We want to see what they're doing. Social media, it still is probably in the top half. But today, at this moment, if we look at the Texas-specific population, it's very clear that search engines, job search websites, and individual company websites are still the top three. And so we need to make sure we have our game on for those. And then if you look at the left, you can see a few more of those cut down a little bit more. We're also seeing that AI search tools are beginning to have a moment. In all candor, right now, what we're seeing is people are using them to apply, which is sort of gunking up a lot of the application funnel right now when you look at applicant tracking. But in terms of actually finding the jobs, we're not seeing them used in the general population as much as we still see these other things around search engines and job search websites. Maybe that will change over time, but as of today, 2026, that's not what we're seeing yet. So still very important to make sure you got those top three really locked down. Here he asked, when searching for a new job, which of the following are the most difficult challenges for you? This is that, as you can see, number one, which is really high, consistently high, and has gotten worse over the last 10 years as we've been asking this a version of this question. Not hearing back from employers about jobs you've applied for. The black hole of applications. We hear about this all the time. People apply, they never hear back. When we don't hear back, what do you think? Did you get it? So they'll even apply again. We see people using AI to apply for multiple times for the same job and all kinds of wild things just to deal with the idea that we're applying and not hearing back. So there's a lot of stress and anxiety right now about applying and not hearing back. And that really showed up as the biggest challenge. So it's one of those things that is very real, and HR leaders and those who do hiring are really struggling with how to address that. Because some of our clients are getting hundreds of applications a day. Others aren't getting as many, but they're still, got a lot of different responsibilities. So how do you navigate through that? Second, as you can see, is finding postings for the types of jobs you want. And then you can see some of the others. I'm sure if you have the skills. So there's a lot in this slide. It's worth coming back to later. What I want to point out, if you go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, knowing what to do or say in a job interview, look at those without a college degree, how much higher they scored. See that, everybody? We see this consistently. People without a college degree tend to have less confidence and experience applying for jobs. And so they really want to know what should they do? What do you say? How do you come across as still having the talent, the ability, the desire to do really well? And so one of the things that we're seeing people promote is that you don't have to have a college degree in order to get a job here and succeed and build a career and a life with us here. So please be aware of that if that's something that that y'all are thinking about, is people without college degrees, that is some anxiety that they're bringing around that more than the other generations you can see. And you can see that here on the left side as well. And then those who undecided Texans are more likely than others to cite limited work experience as their biggest challenge. So there's a lot happening right now when we think about how do we want to help people overcome these challenges. So some of it is, do we want to? Because we're all busy. And then if it is, what are the elements of this that we actually, could address? And that's something that we're seeing people tackle different ways. See job applications that are too long or difficult to complete. I'll give you an example. One of our clients that we work with a lot, they've shortened their job applications dramatically to get the minimum amount of information. And then they call you and text you the second they receive a job application. Because in their industry, they're really struggling to find workers. So all they want to do is basically get permission to get in touch with you. Other industries we work in have done the exact opposite. They're so overwhelmed with applications that they're making them harder to weed out people who they don't think are a fit. So, there's a spectrum, of course, and you got to do what works for you in the job roles you're trying to fill. Here we ask, which of the following aspects of an apartment industry job would absolutely convince you to apply for and accept a job in this industry over another? So again, now we're like, okay, you're head to head with another job in a different industry and they both want you. What's going to really drive it? Please, everybody, notice this. Benefits beats compensation. This is a very new trend, and it's thrilling to see it here in this statewide study because what we're seeing is benefits suddenly have become very, very, very important. And now here we define some of the benefits. You can see that, but just be aware, benefits have really risen to the top in so many situations. So we see benefits, then you see competitive compensation, and then when it drops down to perks and stuff like that, it's really wild to see how benefits have become so high, so prominent. And then you'll see some of the other stuff. If you look down, you can see scheduling and so forth. But I just think it's really important as somebody who's very passionate about benefits to see benefits come out on top as something that's sort of head-to-head decision maker or tiebreaker. Is what we call an absolute, would absolutely convince you to do it. And then you'll see on the left, Gen Z are more likely than millennials, growth and upward mobility in terms of really moving them forward and being excited to absolutely choose that. And then you can see Texans familiar with apartment communities as a place to work, more likely to choose them for fulfilling work, strong reputation, all the stuff. So there's the more familiarity you have with apartment communities, it does change that because now you have some familiarity with it. But if I were to hone in on this, I would say we've got to consistently put benefits near or at the top of everything we do when it comes to employment branding and recruiting. If you heard me speak at the event, I talked a lot about this. Benefits have become so important these days. We have to decide what those benefits are and at what point do people receive them. Here we asked, which of the following would most prevent you from applying for or accepting a job in the apartment industry? So what's going to stop you? We've looked at absolutely convince. Now we're going to look at stop. What do we see? Number one, workload overload. Multiple roles without sufficient support, just being pulled in so many different directions. Candidly, that's what a lot of work is today, particularly in many of these jobs. You just have a lot going on all the time, but people are very much apprehensive about that. After hours demands and safety has scored second. Emotional burnout, we're seeing this across the workforce. And then you can see some of these others turnover. If you look down, you'll see like Texans, the resident challenges starts to pop up again. And then you'll see some of these others. But the key thing is the stress around this, around workload and demands, the emotional side, those all scored very, very high, much higher, if y'all notice this, much higher than limited advancement opportunities, way higher. So really, it's the stress of the job is something that would prevent them, like understanding just how much is going on that they have to do. So that's important. And then if we look to the left, you can see when we drill down, Texans overall more likely than Texas Hispanics to cite turnover or limited advancement, various department jobs. Gen X are more likely than millennials to cite after hours demands and safety as barriers. Gen X want to have a life. They also don't want to get hurt at work. So they're very sensitive to those. Look at the bottom left. 2/3 of Texans, more than 2/3, 67%, have avoided applying for a job because they didn't have the right degree or certification, including 72% of Texans without a college degree. The talent pipeline in the United States is broken, and Texas has this often even worse than other states. We've got to rethink how we attract and develop talent, whether that's a traditional route or whether that's a non-traditional route. And increasingly, when employers can step in and help with that talent development, it really opens up the pool of talent that they're able to attract, bring in, and develop, and ends up being a really great ROI for employers. So we need to be able to open up and say, okay, you don't have to have a college degree or a 4-year degree, or you can have this certification, or you can get this when you work with us. Like all of those things really matter today to the workforce. Anything we can do around that, so impactful. Here we ask, which of the following benefits or perks would be most likely to convince you to apply for and accept a job in the apartment industry over another. So now we're just looking at those benefits or perks. What do we see? Financial incentives, you can see those. Health and insurance benefits, you see those. Flexible scheduling, housing perks. We see childcare scores pretty low, and then community amenities. The childcare scores low because not everybody has kids. But if you have kids that are of the age that need childcare, they tend to score much higher for them. But on the whole, that tends to be a very specific group. So you'll see financial incentives, health insurance benefits, flex scheduling really stand out, and then housing perks. We see this very consistently, which is super exciting. And then on the left, you'll see if you don't have a college degree, health and insurance benefits really has an impact. Gen Z and younger millennials more likely to value childcare support. Why? Because they're of the age where they have little kids, and so they tend to be more responsive to childcare. And then you can see if you're familiar with apartment communities, all these other things matter to you. So if you're curious about it, and you were to say to somebody, just as a hypothetical example, have you ever, do you have any experience or exposure to apartment communities? And they said yes. You might say, oh well, some of the things we offer are professional growth, community amenities, and so forth, because that might score higher with them and better resonate with them. If somebody doesn't have any experience or exposure to apartment communities, there's a lot of education that needs to go on about what happens in an apartment community, what it's like, why they're so important, why you're creating this great sense of place for people. It's really important work. All right. So we've gone from perception, remember, which was positive, to recruiting, like what's actually going to drive people to accept the job, what's going to get people to accept the job compared to another job. Really important. Now we're going to move into that onboarding piece, which is really that sort of first 6 months in that role. We see that onboarding has a huge impact on what tends to happen going forward. So I always joke that the first 3 months determine the first 3 years. So you see a lot of that playing out. So let's take a look here about onboarding. And this is a passion of mine because it's such a straightforward place to have an impact. And yet so often we're all busy. And so we don't necessarily have the resources or prioritize making onboarding great. And it really is very important. So here we asked, which of the following onboarding experiences would most make you feel welcomed, accepted, connected, and comfortable? Those are key behaviors we want to create in that first 30 days of starting a new job in the apartment industry. Now, if everybody would, I know you got to squint a little bit, but please look at Texans without a college degree. Notice how far they pull the averages here. And what do we see? First thing, hands-on training with real examples of day-to-day responsibilities. This is so important. So important. And the second is knowing what you should know, do, and learn in that first 30 days. So when you think about onboarding, what we're seeing is people really want that first 30 days and 90-day roadmap. Here's what you're going to learn. Here's what we're going to cover. Here's who's going to help you, or here's the resources to help you make sure that you can learn all of these things over this period of time. This is not about creating more work. It's actually just about creating transparency and alignment so that they know what they need to be able to do and achieve during that period of time. You'll see that really strongly through many of these. And then you can see the other supportive communication, shadowing, all these beautiful things. But that first 30 days and that hands-on training really score high and would be so important. Now, the trick becomes, how do you do that? And that can look a little bit different. There's a bunch of resources that TAAEF has provided at the end of this. I'll walk you through the list. They're all going to be available on the portal. There's going to be more to come even. So just know, you may be going, okay, Jason, how do I do this? Don't worry. Foundation has a whole bunch of cool things that are going to be coming out. Some are already there, many more to come. So just know we will be circling back to that on the end. We want to make sure we have the insight so we know what it's grounded in. And then you can see here, those without a college degree, the top two, answers really pulls them forward. And those unfamiliar with apartment communities as a place to work, more likely for full day job shadowing. Why is that? Because they don't know what's going on. If you don't have exposure to something, you really don't know what's expected. So these sorts of things really do matter so much. Here we ask, how interested would you be in each of the following types of talent development programs after, listen closely, this key piece, after working for 12 months at a job in the apartment industry? So remember, we asked for that first 3 to 6 months of onboarding. That was the previous one. Now we're taking them through the employee life cycle. We're going, okay, after 12 months, what would matter to you? And what do we see? Basically, every single thing matters to them. People today want as much as you'll provide them if they've worked there a year. So certifications or licensing programs, so important. Leadership training for high performing employees, rewards and recognition tied to skill growth. Like all of these things score very, very, very high. And so I say that to go, okay, well, let's look at all of these options since they all scored high. And if I was running a community, I would go, okay, what is the one, two, or three of these that I could roll out for people that have worked for us for at least a year to really help to continue to advance their skills, their talent, their impact, and their results within our organization. You don't have to do all of them. It's really picking the ones that work for you with your culture, with your resources, with your team, knowing that there's now a beautiful menu that you can choose from. So really, really key. If you look at the bottom left, 70% of Texans, 75% of Texans without a college degree, and 75% of Texas Hispanics would be more likely, I love this, to stay in an apartment industry job long term that pays for continuing education. We are seeing now that developing talent is a way to demonstrate that you're investing in them, and as a result, they will stay longer. There's been a perception, it's one of the ones that I have to fight against a lot, where you're like, oh, I don't want to invest, in our people, they're just going to leave. Well, no, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? And so if you want people to stay, they need to feel like you value them. And one of the best ways to do that is to invest in their talent. By the way, it's often less expensive than giving them raises or promotions. It's so important. The expectation of the workforce today and the desire to see their talent development through their employer is very, very, very high. It's something that we see not just in Texas, but across the US. But it's really important right now because they know the world's changing. They got AI and new tech and new this and new that. They want to know that they're not stagnant and you're not stagnant. And the way you do that is you really do pick some of these ways that you're going to develop their talent after they've been there a year. Some places really are good at onboarding and orientation, and then they just stop the training. And it's such a miss. You get people going right in the right direction up front, but then you got to keep it going. And if you don't, then people don't know that you really are committed to them and their career. All right, now we're going to switch. We're going to talk about retention. So remember, we've done perception. We've done sort of the recruiting piece. We've done talent development. Now we want to get them to actually stay. We need them to stay. So here we ask, which of the following would absolutely convince you to stay at a new job in the apartment community industry after the first 30 days? Now, you may be wondering, Jason, why did you say after the first 30 days? Because in our research, if people leave in the first 30 days, it tends to be a hiring issue and not a retention issue. If you've ever heard me speak at any of these leadership or management conferences, I talk about this a lot. Turnover in the first month is a recruiting issue. That means they were mishired. They misunderstood the job. They were missold the position, whatever. Like that's a fit thing. People who leave after 30 days, now you're starting to get into actual retention issues, management and leadership issues. So we like to ask things after the first 30 days. So assuming you've been there for 30 days, what would most drive that retention? And here's what we see. Free or discounted housing, number one. A positive process would be number two. Flexible shifts, performance recognition, and you can see this. Now, probably going to get in trouble for saying this, but notice that employee appreciation events score the lowest. I know, let's have a party. Well, that's cool, but it actually scores much lower than every single other thing that we tested. So what really matters? The housing, positive onboarding, those sorts of things really do matter if you're able to deliver them. And we do see some differences with Hispanics on the left, and then younger generations wanting a little bit different things when it comes to flexible scheduling. So really key to be able to say, okay, if it's me, I'm always like, what matters most and can I do that? And I'm going to start with the list of what matters most and go down based on what I can and cannot do. I may not be able to always do what is the number one thing that drives it, but maybe I can do number two or number three or number four. But I'm going to go down that list. Usually the things that score the lowest are actually the easiest to do, like employee appreciation events, but they also tend to have the least impact. So people sort of just aren't as moved by them as they think. All right, here we ask, which of the following would absolutely convince you to leave a new job in the apartment industry after the first 30 days? Remember, we asked what's going to get you to stay. Now let's look at the opposite. What will get you to leave? Number one, toxic or disrespectful team culture. Culture crushes retention all the time. Not receiving promised pay. So basically, when people don't keep their word, people are willing to leave. Unsafe or unhealthy working conditions, really an issue. And then you'll see being overworked, unfair treatment, and so forth. I want to point out that no sign of opportunity for advancement or growth is the lowest thing. Feeling undervalued, very low. Unclear job expectations, even. People can deal with all that sort of stuff. What they really do not want to have to deal with is a toxic or disrespectful culture, and not people not delivering what they say they're going to deliver, and then anything around unsafe or unhealthy. This is what actually drives people to leave. Really key. So if you do the opposite of these things, if you're delivering the things you promised, if you're making them feel respected and part of it, keeping things safe, you already took care of the first three. It's pretty awesome. Okay, this one's a little bit wild, but this is one of my favorite charts in the entire slide deck. We're almost done, but this one's really cool. Once I walk you through how to read it, it's really neat. So we asked, when would you expect to be able to receive each of the following after starting a new job in the apartment industry? And then we asked them, now look, just follow me on this column. First pay increase. So when would you expect to receive that? First promotion, increased benefits package, bonuses, career advancement, management role. And then next to that, you can see the time frame when they would first expect to receive it. And what you'll see, first pay increase. If you look at first pay increase, first 3 months, after first 3 months, 25%. After the first 6 months, another 25%. So we're already at more than half, if you add up before that, within the first 6 months, expect to receive their first pay increase. There's a lot of strategy around that. Does that mean you start them a little bit less, then tell them that you're going to give them a raise? Or if you were going to give them a pay increase at the end of a year, maybe you break it up and give them some at 6 months and then the rest at the year. These are real strategies because we have to understand people's expectations. But the vast, 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 vast majority expect to receive their first pay increase within a year. First promotion, this is pretty interesting. First 3 to 6 months, pretty high numbers where people are like, I'm already ready for promotion. Now, I will tell you, one of the behaviors we spend a lot of time thinking about right now is that many in the workforce are confusing what we call competency with mastery. And I want to make sure we clarify that, right? Just because you can do something doesn't mean you've mastered it. So we see people confusing competency with mastery. And so therefore they think they should get their promotion and pay much sooner. Hey, I did it. I'm ready for my next, promotion. But there's so much more nuance and layer that only comes usually with experience. And so that's one of the things we're having to work with a lot right now. Then you can see where benefits are increased, bonus opportunities, tends to be a lot of alignment. On the management role, you see a big jump up after a year. So if you were to put it all together, you'll see on the left, over 2/3 of Texans expect to receive bonus and their first pay increase after the first 6 months or sooner. That's what I was mentioning. 93% of Texans expect to receive their first pay increase after the first year or sooner. And so you can see that through the promotions. So basically, you've got sort of the 6-month window and a year window when people expect a lot of different things to happen. And then you can see the management role. Now, the reality is many organizations today don't have enough layers where they can consistently give you bigger titles and bigger roles. So we have to be able to balance that. And a lot of times, if we can't give them that fancy promotion or whatever, we have to have strategies to help them through that. We call that progress over promotion, where we help people to see that they're still making progress and moving forward, even if they're not getting promoted or not getting that raise. But the place you have to start with is what are expectations today? And that's why this was really great to separate myth from truth. So I'm so glad that TAAEF asked this question. Here we asked, besides salary and traditional benefits, which of the following workplace perks or incentives would absolutely influence you to stay long-term, which we defined as 3+ years. Now, I will tell you, some people want to define long-term as 5+ years or more. 3+ years is a stretch now for a lot of people when they think long-term. So just know that's probably the minimum long-term that we can go with. All right, so what do we see? Performance bonuses tied to occupancy, lease renewals. So basically, performance-related bonuses. Discounted or free on-site housing, again, strong. Then we see these advancement pathways scores much higher now because now they feel like, okay, you're saying I've been there or you want me to stay long-term. Then you see flexible scheduling and some of these others. And again, what scores low? Recognition programs and stuff like that. They just don't score as high as people think. So there's very specific things that would drive those long-term retention, but they're very much tied to bonuses, housing, clear advancement, and some level of flexibility. That's what stands out over and over again. And then it really just drops off pretty fast. Here we asked, how interested would you be in each of the following aspects of building a long-term career in the apartment industry? And the beauty of this is it actually aligns with the slide before and the slide in the very beginning when we talked about their perception. We run into problems in an industry when these things don't align, but y'all's happens to align, which is lovely. So what do we see people really want? Higher pay through performance or promotions, job stability. It just comes up over and over and over again. Clear career paths and advancement, flexibility. So this really does align. The beauty of that is you can then create a roadmap and resources that track all of these. And what the foundation, Education Foundation, has done is the resources they've built and those that they're continuing to build, y'all can put to use right away and begin to implement them in your communities and your various properties, which is super cool. And you can see a little bit more detail there. But if you go down to the bottom left, one of my favorite, 75% of Texans, 3/4 think working in the apartment industry teaches them skills they can use for the rest of their lives. Boom! And the crowd roar. That was a crowd roaring. But that's so wonderful to see the positivity. Yeah, all right. So what are some of the big takeaways? There's a few things, and then we'll get into the resources. Really strong overall positive perception. I'm just telling y'all, as somebody who looks at these studies all day long, it is amazing to see how positively the apartment industry is viewed in Texas by Texans. So, yay, great job. What do we see? Lots of interest in community management, and there were other roles. As you remember, the key is we want to talk about all those roles because people can sort of see themselves in different ones. Top drivers, that job security. Remember, security, 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 and then benefits, especially housing. We see their career consideration. There's a basket of things that they're looking for. On the recruiting side, we go, okay, what still matters today? Number one, as we saw, was search engines. Number two is job search websites. And then the third was your actual company website where they're going to go and look in the employment section and see what's there. So you want to make sure all those align. Biggest friction and frustration is, applying and then never hearing back, which that's not unique to this industry. That is something we see consistently. Benefits, compensation, can you be good drivers? And then what are they worried about? Just being overloaded, having to, affect them after hours, safety, those sorts of things. A lot of just the stress and anxiety around that. And then we got some good looks at the benefits that they really want, which is great. When we go to the onboarding piece, there's very specific things they want. Remember, in that sort of first 3 to 6 months, 1 to 6 months, hands-on training, really sort of separating myth from truth around what's going on in the apartment communities. What do they need to know? And remember, showing them what they need to know was also very high. So they can follow that roadmap. And then after 12 months, basically they wanted every talent development you would offer them, which is lovely. Retention, we see that housing theme again, what gets people to leave, that disrespectful, toxic culture, which is great to see because that's something we can all really work on and influence. We do see the bonus and the promotion start around 6 months in terms of the majority of them, which is high, but it's not outrageous. There's others we've done that have been like 3 months. So I'm actually pretty happy with 6 months. As we saw that, those really high numbers within the first year, which is normal. And then you can see some of the long-term retention strategies that really drive it. What I want to ask all of you to do is please, 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 please visit the Education Foundation website and start to download these various tools that are going to be there and share them with your teams. This research will not work, all these insights, all these great discoveries, if we don't share them with other people and start to turn them into tools and begin to put them into use. And Education Foundation has already done that for you. Executive summary is there. This webinar replay will be there so you can share it with others who couldn't make it today. They've got this amazing recruiting guide and checklist that's coming. It is beautiful. And then they've got this great live here, work here toolkit. So please, please, please don't let today be the end of this conversation. Please lean on these resources and tools so that you can use those. They're so good and they're available to all of y'all. The URL is right there. What I would love to do, if it's okay, is invite Ian back and then we'll take a few questions. I do have one favor. If everybody would go through the chat, and if you, I know you feel overloaded because there's a lot of information right now, but if you had a good time and you got some good stuff out of this, will you just write, yes, thank you, fun, great. I mean, I'm a millennial. I need some feedback. Give me something in the chat. I would really appreciate that. If you had a good time, loved it. Thank you, Casey. Casey, I really appreciate it. Thank you, Esmeralda. That makes me. Thank you, Iris. I appreciate it. Woo! Thank you, Matt. Love the exclamation mark. Great info. Yeah. Well, it's a team effort, team effort, team effort, team effort. Great committee. Go Ian.